morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, welcome. Can everybody hear me? I think I'm unmuted. I realize that I can't always have that playing and have the feedback. So welcome. My name is Quinn Jacobson, and this is the Studio Q Show Live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, or whenever you're watching this. It doesn't matter. It's all good. We've got something very interesting for everybody today. I think you'll find this interesting. I was really amazed to come back around, kind of full circle. I've got a whole notebook of experiments that I'm slowly coming around to getting to. In the next couple of weeks, I should have my darkroom going and get everything up to speed and get going on some of these projects I'm doing. So welcome, everyone. We're going to talk about albumin on glass, making albumin negatives today. This is not wet collodion. This is albumin. So you'll find this interesting, I think. Although we call this the wet collodion show, we like to deviate a little bit. We can work through some non-collodion processes. Hello, Thilo and Malit and Chris and Tim Fry. Good to see everybody. And John, good to see you, and Craig and Jeffrey in the live show. Let's get onto this thing and make it happen. We know how this goes. I've got to do my little slideshow where I'll ramble for days. We'll never get anywhere. So let's get this, present this. Yes, and today is Saturday, September 25th. The next show we do is going to be in October. I can't believe it. This is I'm feeling the year slip by. Like I just said, we're going to look at the albumin process on glass today, making negatives. This is from the Practical Photography on Glass and Paper by Charles Long. We talked about him just a little bit last week. This is full-on albumin on glass, making negatives today. We'll do news and social media, technical questions and answers. Got some fun stuff in there. Wow, I'm getting errors that it's not going live on Facebook here. I'm just going to remove that. I don't know why we're having some technical difficulties this morning, but that's okay. It'll be on YouTube. And so we're going to look at some technical info or some technical questions and answers. Oliver from Germany sent in some good stuff, and recommended reading and recommended watching. So hello, Matthew and Fareed. A pity I'm always at work. Hello, guys. Yeah. That's okay. That's fine. You can watch it anytime. So let's do this. Let's start with news and social media here. Our good friends, John and Colleen Graybill, Edward Curtis's great-grandson. You know him. He's a friend of mine. He and Colleen are in Michigan this week. Here's a great article on a trove of unseen photos, documents indigenous cultures in 1920 Alaska. I've got the book right behind me here. I recommend you go over to curtislegacyfoundation.org if you don't have that book and grab it. I've mentioned it a few times on the show. It's a great book. Unseen, his diary entries. I've showed it a couple of times. I've shown it a couple of times on the show here. Really good stuff. If you don't have that, I recommend you taking a look at it because it is worth seeing. But they're in Michigan. They've got I think it's Muskegon, Michigan. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere in Michigan there. Good stuff. They had one here in Buena Vista, Colorado, a month or two ago. Good stuff coming around. This is really neat here. The George Eastman Museum just released some 16 millimeter films on historic processes. You can go to the eastman.org site, wet-collodion.process. Let's take a look at this. There's no audio to it. Of course, it's shot in 1948 or 49 on 16 millimeter film, and he shows the wet collodion process. Look at this negative he produces. It's kind of funny, but it's really neat to see these old things. I think it's fascinating. A young guy does an intro to this, but I just cut to the wet collodion film. So there he is with his darkroom on his packing it into the lake there. He's got his three-piece Sunday suit on, of course. You got to wear that if you're going to do wet collodion and a tie, long tailcoat. And here's his assistant. His assistant's going to set up his tent for him while the photographer scouts out what he wants to photograph. And look at how gentle they set this down. You can tell there's some Don't spill this chemistry stuff. I love that. That's so cool. 80 years ago, photography was far from simple. And so here they go. This is not a quick fish tent they set up here or a dark box. This is quite an elaborate tent, quite a large tent, actually. I can imagine if this thing, and look at how heavy that canvas looks. I imagine in the summertime, he's just baking it. To photograph in the field meant taking along a portable darkroom. Well, the portable darkroom isn't the problem. It's the big tent and his assistants there pounding the stakes in. It looks like he's probably making half plate images or something like that, a smaller format, which was obviously very, very common. I mean, half plate wasn't that small back in the day. So there he is scouting it out. He wants to take a look to see what he's got here. And he said, "Sir, please, assistant, hold my hat. I need to look at my ground glass here." So he gets in there, takes a look at the lake or the scene. Before making each picture, a glass plate was coated with iodized collodion. And remember, we showed you what that George Eastman recipe was. I found the patent on that. It was kind of interesting. Here he is with his yellow light. It looks bigger than half plate, actually. I don't know. Maybe whole plate, 8 by 10. I don't know. His camera's not that large, so it may have been a cut, some editing issues there. But regardless, it doesn't matter. So there he is, flowing the plate using that pinch method. He sets his pour bottle down, and guess what he picks up? A drain bottle. He does not drain back into his original collodion bottle, contrary to popular belief. So there he is, nice little rocking going on there. The yellow light. Imagine it was difficult. 16 millimeter film to shoot in there. The plate was made light sensitive in a solution of silver nitrate. Of course, and then it just cuts right to the dipper going down. And a little bit of lighting problem there, which is understandable. Closes up his plate holder there. I would imagine that's whole plate now that I'm looking at that. But his camera isn't that big. So, again, there may have been some editing issues. The plate is exposed while still wet. So there it is. Lifts up his dark slide, makes his exposure, pulls his plate holder back off, and into the darkroom he goes. And look at that developer. He's got some sweeps on that. You know that. But wait for that developer on. But look, the magic appears. You cannot see anything on this negative. Look at that thing. It is just black as night there. Just, wow, he's got some density there. From collodion negatives, gold tone prints were made on albumin-coated paper sensitized with silver salts. Printing light, the sun. Absolutely. And then we cut to the contact printer. He opens the back of the contact printer up, and look at this. Well, we go dark for a second, but look at this. Et voila. There you go. There's your albumin print of his scene. We don't get a real good look at it, but they've got all of. They just released them not too long ago. I encourage you to go over to Eastman Kodak and take a look at that, or eastman.org and take a look at those. Those are kind of fun. So there's that. Let's go back over here. This is something I found interesting this week on my Facebook. This was actually on Chemical Pictures Facebook page here. I had never heard of this before, so you guys can chime in if you know anything about this. Yeah, it's a good find, John. You check those out. I just did the wet collodion one because it's more relevant to us. But yeah, it's a fun find there for sure. But this was on my John Haverstick. I don't know him. I see him post on my board quite often here, or somewhat regularly, I guess. He says, I've noticed that some, but not all of my more recent plates develop a haziness over time. I haven't changed my process or chemistry, so not sure where to start with this troubleshooting. These two images were made within a week of each other 2 months ago. One on the left is the older of the two, looks fine. The one on the right has a hazy appearance that developed over the past couple of weeks. Both UVPX collodion washed for 30 minutes, print washer tray under flowing water, varnish with ultra pale varnish. Now, this is what I didn't know about. I don't know anything about ultra pale varnish. So I chimed in. I said, this doesn't look to be a fix issue, more of a varnish issue. Humidity can cause these issues. If it's not cured properly, there's water in the alcohol, the varnish, blah, blah, blah. So he goes on to say, and then Eric Redderbush chimes in And the whole conversation goes, oh, if you're using that ultra pale varnish, this can sometimes happen. And it's like, there's a shelf life on varnish. I didn't know that there was a shelf life on varnish. I thought that was the whole idea of varnish, was once you varnish an image, this haze, this looks like gum sandarac interacting with water. That's where you get this blue haze on that right image. So I didn't know any of that. I didn't know that there was um, issues with varnish out there. And then when Eric Redderbush chimed in, he said this happens with this. Oh yeah, almost looks like varnish humidity. Yes. Jeffrey says UPV shellac pale varnish. That happened to a few of my plates too, getting that pale blue haze. Yeah, it's I don't know, why would that be? I don't understand that at all. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not calling anybody out here, but if there's a varnish out there that's doing this, I don't understand why people don't make. If you want to use shellac varnish, you want to use gum sandarac, doesn't matter. Make your own. You can make your own. It's easy. It's not a problem. So I'm not really sure why this is happening with that particular varnish. They said they'd inquire about it. I never heard anything back about it. So I just throwing it out there. I'd never seen that. I mean, I see it if it's humid and you're using gum. This is what water and gum or sandarac looks like when it's exposed to a lot of water. Gets that blue haze on it. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there as a technical. And it wipes off, he says. You see that right there? He says, assuming you're using ultra pale, I've noticed the same thing on plates using a blue haze. I believe the shellac only has a few months before it expires. Don't know what that means. It's beautiful and clean if it works out, but I've had pitfalls for sure with it. If it's like mine, you can wipe off the haze with a cotton ball, but it comes back after. Bizarre. I've never heard that. And I think John chimed back in and said, yeah, it does wipe off, kind of thing, blah, blah, blah. Just it's out there. If you got some information, send it along to me. So let's get to the heart of the matter here. This is fun. And you will find this, number one, if you work in wet collodion, this is going to be fairly simple for you. If you work in wet collodion and you make albumin paper, this is going to be ultra easy for you. And let's talk about what this is. This is albumin on glass. These are negatives. 1848, introduced by Abel Niepce de Saint Victor. I'm sure I'm butchering his name. This was the first successful photographic process on glass, by the way. The negatives showed very fine detail, but exposure times were long, which discouraged greater use. You will not get a finer image than the binder being albumin, period. I mean, this strip, I mean, wet collodion, daguerreotypes, anything like that. I mean, daguerreotypes are positive, so it's a little different analogy there, comparison. The advantage over wet collodion process introduced a few years later was that it could be used dry and therefore much easier to work with when traveling. Of course, just like dry collodion, right? That advantage was diminished when dry collodion processes were introduced in the mid-1850s. The process remained in commercial use for the stereo diapositive and the lantern slide production, especially for landscapes and architectural work. So right off the bat, they're kind of praising it a little bit here. Albumin spread over the glass plate provided carrier binder to hold the silver halide, however you want to say it. The albumin used to coat the plate had to be made by the photographer. The solution was made by mixing together egg white, water, potassium iodide. This was beaten in a froth, filtered, coated on the glass plate. A plate whirler was sometimes used to force a liquid to the edge of the plate. We'll talk about this. When dry, the plate was sensitized with a silver nitric acetic acid solution. We're going to describe this silver acetate solution and why we use that, either in dipping or a bath or dish. It was ready to be exposed. Development was with gallic acid. Remember, we talked about these three developers a couple of weeks ago? You'll see the gallic used today. It took around 20 minutes. It depends. It varies. But the image was fixed in normal way. Ground glass was sometimes used to give better adhesion for the albumin. Exposure could be made while the plate was still moist, which improved its speed. We're going to talk about that as well, too. Or it could be dried, in which case it remained usable for several days, about up to a week or so, after it's sensitized, right? There were usual variations to the process, including its use in paper negatives. In 1851, Talbot presented a process, or patented a process, called amphitite, which was used a layer of albumin on glass, but it was in other respects different to the process described here. So don't confuse those two. Talbot seemed to always have his fingers in these things early in the day. He was litigious. He loved to sue people for the processes, and he just loved to get on that. So, and then on the right here, this is an albumin glass negative, agriculture instruments in Dutch. It talks about there, the Dutch word for it, attributed to Claude Marie Ferrier, 1851. It's from the Rijksmuseum there. That's an albumin negative. So let's go over this. This is from Charles Long's book. Next week, we're going to look at the silver sunbeam and some photographic news, and we're going to compare how these recipes differed 10 years apart. So we're going to look at Charles Long's work and methodology and recipe today. This is from the Practical Photography Glass on Paper, like I said. So what are the advantages of using the albumin process on glass or making negatives as the albumin is the binder? Extremely detailed. I mean, fine negatives. Can be used as dry plate. Dry it. You can take it on location, and it doesn't need to be varnished. The albumin is a hard binder. It does not need to be varnished. So there are some advantages there. I would say number one, the detail, period. Number one, the detail. And close second, if you're trying to work in areas where you can't get a dark room, portable dark box, a dark tent, whatever in, this is a great solution. But dry collodion provides you that as well too. But dry collodion isn't as detailed, and it needs to be varnished. That's a very, very delicate negative, dry collodion. Disadvantages, long exposures. 5 to 30 minutes, depending on what you're photographing. If you put it in your holder right after you sensitize it or not, which kind of takes away from the advantage number two, and long development. It can be up to 20 minutes to develop these plates. So let's talk about this. Here's Long's process. And so it's really difficult because if you're talking about albumin and you're working in wet plate, we're usually talking about making prints. This is not making prints. This is making negatives for printing. You can make albumin negatives and print them on albumin paper. Beautiful. That's great. But this is a different type of thing. Oh, I didn't see these. Let's just jump back. John says, can you strip shellac varnish? Maybe that. Oh, yeah. Dissolves away, reveals a good collodion layer again. Yeah. You could probably strip a shellac varnish. Yes, you could. Kind of like gum. It would be more sensitive. You'd have a greater tendency to eat that image away. But yeah, we'll try it. I've removed gum center. Yeah. Okay, they're just having a conversation there. Good. Yes, that's good. So here it is, albumin process on glass. So I'm going to jump right down to the solutions required for albumin process. First, you want to take 10.4 grams of ammonium iodide, NH4I, just like we saw our collodion with, for every 29.6 milliliters of distilled water. The next is the silver nitrate, or the sensitizing bath. This is 3.2 grams of silver nitrate, 29.6 mils of DH2O, distilled water, and 7 mils of glacial acetic acid. We're going to talk about what the silver acetate is and why do we add glacial acetic acid to the silver bath. We've talked about that a little in the past. We've never applied it, but this is the application for it. And then the developer is a gallic acid, 30 grains and 8 ounces. That's 1.94 grams of gallic acid to 237 mils of DH2O, distilled water. And then the fix, pretty common. You see quite a strong solution there, 227 grams of sodium thiosulfate and 592 mils of water. So this is what it is. The only advantage in the use of the albumin as a vehicle for the sensitive compounds is that we are enabled by its adoption to use the plates in a dry state, which renders the process particularly, so he's going to start off with saying, this is a great thing to do because now you can take it out. And keep in mind, this is, it came out in 1848, pre-collodion. So particularly applicable for views and such subjects are removed from any convenient position for manipulation, meaning you don't have a darkroom there. The plates prepared by this process are not very sensitive, requiring a long exposure in the camera. And further, there is some little difficulty in obtaining the dark parts of sufficient intensity to make satisfactory positives. So he's saying you'll tend to underexpose these. We'll talk about this. The process of obtaining a picture on albuminized glass divides itself into the following preparations. Preparation of the albumin, spreading the same on the surface of the glass, drying the film, rendering the film sensitive to light, exposing the camera, develop the latent image, and fixing the picture when formed. The various plans have been proposed for the preparation of the albuminized plates are very similar that it matters very little which formula is followed. The subjoined, however, will found to fulfill all the conditions necessary to obtain a perfect picture. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the preparation of the albumin. Throw the whites of 3 or 4 new laid eggs in a deep dish. We're going to go with 4 eggs here, 4 egg whites. Having carefully removed any opaque portions, meaning the chalazi, the yolk, we just want the clear egg white, and fresher the better. Beat them together with a whisker, fork. You'd use a blender, right? A whisker, a cake batter beater, so to speak, for 2 or 3 minutes. Just break up the structure of the mass. Then add 1 drachma solution of the iodide of ammonium. So that's 3.5 milliliters of this first solution. Remember, 10.4 grams of ammonium iodide, 29.6 milliliters of the H2O. You add 1 drachma, that's 3.5 mils of this solution for each egg white. So we're going to do 4. So you'd add to 4 egg whites, you'd add 14 mils of this solution. And beat together until the whole is converted into perfectly white froth, like you're making albumin paper. Cast it into a funnel, which has been previously placed, double fold. He's just talking about filtering it. Protect it, let it sit for 10 or 12 hours. I just put it in the fridge overnight. The liquid or the liquid will separate. The whites will be on top, and you can pull the white, the foam, basically the whites off the top, and drain the clear liquid into a bottle placed under the funnel to receive it. So that's what he's talking about. Just like you're making albumin paper, but this is 14 mils for 4 egg whites, and you've got your solution for your plate. So let's talk about, this is out of the Treatise on Photography, Charles Waldock's book, 1862. Let's talk about the acetate of silver, silver acetate. As the name indicates, this salt, because we're going to talk about the silver nitrate next, how you sensitize the plate. This salt is formed by the combination of acetic acid with silver oxide. Being very sparingly soluble in water, it deposits in small lamella, or lamlar, I don't know how to say that word actually, crystals, when it's the shape of the crystal. Whenever a soluble acetate is added to a solution of silver salt, it is a little more soluble in the solution of silver nitrate than in water. Here's the thing, the silver acetate is more easily decomposed than silver nitrate alone, silver nitrate. Hence, when added to the silver solution in a collodion and paper process, he's talking about the paper process, we're talking about the albumin negatives, it imparts an increased sensitivity to the picture. This is why now we're going to talk about the spreading it on the glass and then rendering it sensitive. That's why when we talk about why do we add glacial acetic acid, we're trying to bring that ISO up, right, for the albumin binder. So let's talk about how you put this on the glass. So you've beat your whites, you've added 15 milliliters of this ammonium iodide solution into the whites, you've separated it. Now you've got basically what looks like your regular albumin that you'd use on paper. Spreading the albumin on the glass plate. This is best accomplished after having first rendered the plate perfectly clean by rubbing it with a mixture of tripoli and alcohol, or calcium carbonate and alcohol and water, and then thoroughly washing it dry and fixing the pneumatic plate holder. You see that figure 9 there in the center of the back of the plate. Holding the plate in the left hand horizontally position, he's talked about taking the iodized albumin to cover it and flow the albumin. You can actually use a glass rod. Albumin is a little tough to flow sometimes. You can use a glass rod to spread it out. Or remember Peter on his orotone, he used a salad spinner. You could use that as well too to make his orotone. This is basically the same thing. Flow the albumin may be directed with the aid of the glass rod, the superfluous quantity being returned to the bottle the same manner as if we were working with collodion. Return the plate now to the horizontal position as there should appear any irregularity in the film. Gentle rotary, so move it around, keep moving it, make sure it goes to the edges, get a good, nice cover on it. If you do your plates with albumin, this is going to be similar of covering it. Well, it is. It's the same thing. You just have ammonium iodide in the albumin. So, and then he talks about put it in a box, the groove, drying box designed to receive it, where it must remain for a few hours to become dry and suited for the next operation. So you clean your plate, you pour your iodized albumin on it, spread it out, let it drain, let it dry. It'll dry. It depends on the heat, the temperature, and the humidity, but it'll dry in a few hours. do a set of them, let them dry. Then let's render the plate sensitive or make it sensitive. So here's where the silver acetate comes in. So 3.2 grams of silver nitrate, 7 mils of glacial acetic acid, and 29.6 mils of DH2O. I'll give you a little recipe at the end here. We'll just combine all these things. That's what you want to sensitize the plate in. So the operation of rendering the plate sensitive is performed by pouring some of the above solution into a shallow glass dish. This is where I say do not use, you can use your regular bath box if you want, but this would be better to use a nice Pyrex dish and just put 5 mils or 1/4 of an inch of the solution in the bottom, raise it up to one end, put your plate in, and then let it flow back over. This is and that's what he talks about. This is best affected by resting one end of the plate quite in the bottom of the corner, one side of the dish, and then dexterously allowing it to quickly drop down on the fluid, taking care that no air bubbles intervene. And that's not too bad to do. The plate should be allowed to rest in this position for the space of 2 minutes. So you're going to sensitize this for 2 minutes. Dry iodized albumin plate for 2 minutes in this silver acetate bath. When it is to be carefully raised and removed to a dish of distilled water, they're to be agitated for 2 to 3 minutes. So you just pull it out, put it in your distilled water, and agitate it for 2 or 3 minutes. And then stand it up on end in a warm, dry place, or place it right into your dark slide, just like it's coming out of your silver bath. And we'll talk about this exposure. You're gonna increase your exposure by at least 50%. It'll be 50% faster anyway. Exposure in the camera. So this the exact time of exposure depends on the nature of the object, the position of the sun, and the temperature of the air. In good light, with a temperature of 60 degrees Fahrenheit, from 5 to 6 minutes will be quite sufficient. When the view is a moderately light color, such as stone building, cathedral, etc. But if a landscape where you're going to now include these kind of greens and, et cetera, you have various colors in there. The object we desire, then much longer time, say from 20 to 30 minutes, will not overdo the picture. That's for a dry plate. Your wet plate would be about 5 minutes if you took it right out, but you're kind of defeating the purpose if you're not using them dry. So very few trials will, however, do more informing judgment of the operator in this particular than pages of direction. He's just saying, look, it just depends case to case. I could sit here and give you examples, but you got to go out and do some testing. So let's talk about developing the image. On removal of the plate from the camera, it's placed on the leveling stand or in your hand and treated with a solution of gallic acid. So we've talked about the gallic acid, the mixture there. And so here's the trick. You're going to pour the gallic acid on. It's going to make a faint image. The image will appear quite developed, but rather of a faint color. A small quantity of gallic acid and silver acetate in equal proportions is to be poured over it evenly. So you use your gallic acid first, then you mix equal portions of your silver bath solution and more gallic acid equal, say 10 and 10 mils, whatever, 20 mils total, and you pour it over. And then he said, this will deepen the tones and give force and vigor to the whole picture. When this point is attained and the impression is sufficiently dark, the developing solution is to be thrown off, quantity of water poured over the surface, and you're on your way. Simple. And then fixing the picture, which consists of in pouring on the plate a solution of hyposulfite of soda, hypo, and leaving it there until the yellow color wash. You know how to fix a plate. Same thing. Drying the plate concludes the process of obtaining a negative by means of a film of albumin. These negatives may be printed without being varnished. If little care is taken, if their surfaces are not allowed to come into contact with grit. Yeah, you don't want to have stuff on it and be, they're tough. They're not that tough, but they're tough. You can get away without varnishing and print with them. The exquisite detail of albumin pictures forms one very great recommendation for the adoption of the process. There he says it at the end rather than the beginning. He starts out by saying you can use them as dry plates. This is a great advantage. And now at the end, he says this is very great recommendation for the adoption of the process. Another advantage is that the plates can be used in the dry state, as he said, and being excited for several days. The only drawback appears to be the length of exposure in the camera and the tardy development of the photographic image after having been subjected to the solar influence by the sun, right? And like I said, next week we'll talk about how about 10 years later, how these have changed. Well, 7 to 10 years later, we'll talk about that. So let's look at this. This is I read this stuff and then I consume it and then I consolidate it. And this is what I'm going to start doing. Here's a great way to approach this. This is a recipe on the right and the process, or the left, and the process on the right. So let's talk about this. So albumin, egg white, that's what albumin is. Solution A, I call it. Solution A contains 10.4 grams of ammonium iodide, 29.6 mils of DH2O. 1 egg equals 3.5 mils of solution A. 4 eggs will take 14 mils. So let's do 4 egg whites. Take your silver nitrate bath, 32 grams of silver nitrate, 296 mils of distilled water, and 70 mils of glacial acetic acid. That's your silver nitrate or your silver acetate bath. Your developer, 1.94 grams of gallic acid into 237 mils of DH2O. That's enough developer to get you through a few plates, and your fix is pretty straightforward. So process on the right, methodology on the right, clean the glass plate well with calcium carbonate, just like you're going to do a negative or a positive on clear glass. Flow the plate with the iodized albumin, allow the plate to dry, pretty straightforward. Do a few plates so you can test them out, right? Sensitize the plate in the silver bath, silver acetate for 2 minutes, then wash in the H2O for 2 to 3 minutes. You can load the plate directly into the holder at this point, and your exposure is going to be at least 50% faster, at least. You might even get a lot more than that. Or allow the plate to dry, dark and 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, good for a week or longer. They say several days, but what I've read is you can get away with a week. You sensitize your plates, they're ready to go, they're dry. You can take them out a week later and expose them. Number 5, load the plate and expose. Bright sunny day with bright objects, 5 to 6 minute exposure. Landscape may take 20 to 30 minutes. I'm going to run some tests up here. I'm very high altitude, a lot of UV. My exposures are going to be a lot quicker than this, I can guarantee, especially if I'm doing, bright, bright objects or rocks or things like that, that really reflect. 6, develop the plate. Flow the gallic acid developer first and allow the faint image to appear. He doesn't really call it faint. He just doesn't have the vigor, right? Then mix half the gallic acid developer with half the silver nitrate or silver acetate bath and flow over the plate. Development may take 15 to 20 minutes. You might find it in your conditions a little bit different, but it's going to be several minutes. You don't have a chance of ruining this. This is one thing that you can take your time with and watch and see, experiment with. Fix a plate in hypo and no need to varnish. That is the basic rundown of the process right there. Yes, good. Yeah, that's why I'm putting it up here. Grew and Christina White. Great. Yeah. Look, if you're doing wet collodion and you're doing albumin prints, or even if you're not, this may be something you will not see a detail like this in any other negative. This is one of the reasons to do it. I mean, you're not going to be doing portraits with it, maybe, but you're going to be able to do a lot with it. Hey, Chopper. Do I understand this correctly? One redevelops during the normal process to add density. Basically, yeah, that's what you're doing. You're not really redeveloping. You're just bringing out, again, this is a very, very slow. One of the reasons, the drawback is how slow it is. The advantage is how much detail you get, right? As albumin is the binder. But the drawback is, so the gallic acid, the silver acetate, that's all giving us an advantage to speed everything up. Then what you do, you bring out the image with your gallic acid, half and half, with your silver bath and gallic acid. And you're basically, yes, you're redeveloping it right there. Really, you're actually just developing it. But yes, you are correct, Chopper. Steve says, fascinating, especially compared to dry. Yes. And I thought some of you dry plate people would appreciate this as an alternative to dry plate. You're going to get a lot more detail. You won't believe, if you ever get to a gallery and you can see some of these original prints from these. These are just amazing. It's amazing stuff. Did you get the impression development could be many? Oh yeah, absolutely. You could make these plates the next day, take them out, expose them, and then they're dry, right? So develop them 3 or 4 or 5 days later. Sure, absolutely. Just a lot like film. Absolutely, you can do that. That's the great advantage to this. I mean, this was pre-collodion, but collodion came around. Everybody got tired of taking their darkroom out all the time. And then dry collodion came along, but this still had the advantage of having the detail that you don't get with collodion. Steve, so now addressing my attention to rabbit holes. Yeah, I know. But you know what? I look at these as arrows in your quiver, right? You run some tests and say, hey, I've done that. I can take this arrow out and use it for this project, or that makes good sense to use it here or use it there. So yes. Hugo, do we have any indication what speed lenses long as you? Yes. Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great question. Typically, when we talk about outdoor photography in the 19th century, they talk about a pea-hole aperture, meaning the size of a pea, right? A green pea. So you're talking f11, f16 here. So you change the aperture on something, you're going to then relatively change the exposure. We know that, right? We can figure that out. So yeah, very good question. It's usually talking about an f16 sunny kind of proposition when we're talking exposures. And usually when you're doing landscape or architecture, stone buildings, all that kind of stuff, you're talking about, you want some depth of field, right? You don't want the doorknob in focus and then the rest of the building falling off, right? So that's a great question. Given the detail, I would tempted to use a small, yes, that's another reason for doing that. Very good, Hugo. That's absolutely correct. Really amazing stuff. If you can have, if you can take the time to have some tests, make some tests, make a half a dozen plates. You're going to make up the albumin. 4 egg whites will give you plenty. Work 4x5 half plate, whatever, even whole plate, whatever. Make 3 or 4 whole plates, whatever. Make enough so you can run some tests, do a batch with testing, and then see where you get. You may just absolutely fall in love with this. I'm going to do this very, very soon. I may use this process for some of my work coming up. I'm going to test it and see. Because I'm doing rock formations, I'm doing trees, I'm doing things that I can do 10, 15-minute exposures without any issues at all. John says, I've never had any issue using stainless steel in a KitchenAid. Is there any advantage, perhaps plastic coated whisk needed? No, I don't think. I mean, I whisked mine up in a stainless steel. When I make albumin, I make tons and tons of albumin. This is just making albumin for paper, but adding ammonium iodide. That's all it is. You're putting the salt in the binder, then putting it in the silver acetate or silver nitrate. This is silver acetate. It's got acetic acid in it to speed it up, decompose quicker, right? And you're just sensitizing the salt in there. You're just substituting the collodion binder with the albumin binder, the salts that you put in collodion, the iodide and bromide if you're doing positives or dry or whatever, iodide, just iodide in this case, and then your silver bath differs a little bit just because you use the acetic acid to speed the process up. But yeah, you wouldn't gain any advantage on that at all, I don't think. Just use what this is very, 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 very manageable, Hugo. It is. This is something. There's so many of these processes that get so detailed and so involved. I don't even attempt to share them because they're just too much. And something that falls in line, like dry collodion, If you're doing wet collodion, you can do dry collodion, some tan or some gum arabic, that not a big deal. If you're doing negatives, wet collodion negatives, and you want to be able to have, you want more detail, you want a little something more for out of your negatives, this albumin process is a good chance it will give you that. Oliver, no, this is strictly negatives. This is strictly negatives. I mean, yes, you can make all a positive is an underexposed negative. So I would say, yes, you can make positives with this. And you can do them on metal plates. You can do them on, you could experiment with this and do whatever you want. This is my interest in this is for extremely fine detailed negatives for printing pop. That's the advantage. And man, this will print on albumin, it'll print on salt, colloidal chloride, gum bichromates, whatever you want to do, but you're going to get detail like crazy out of these, because that binder, that albumin binder is just going to give it to you. Yeah, good question. Jeffrey says, what percent does the glacial acetic acid have to be? I would go with a 90+%. When they're referencing that, they're not talking about a 30%. I'd go as strong as you can, and then if you have to use a weaker solution, extrapolate that out so you get the advantage there. Because at the end of the day, you want that silver acetate to be active, so you don't have it decomposes quicker, meaning it speeds up the process, so to speak, makes it more sensitive. You're going to be really, really super sensitive, lack sensitivity if you don't. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys got something out of that, and somebody will try something. So Oliver, I'm glad you're in here. Oliver's from Germany. He wrote me an email. We'll just kind of go through this. This is really great. I appreciate you sharing this with us, Oliver, because at the end of the day, it does a couple of things. We talked about resensitizing the plate, and he's got a good example of that here. So here he goes. He says, hello, Quinn. I hope you're well. Almost finished with I am almost finished with my darkroom. I'm getting there anyway. This week I did a test on wet plate, trying to arrange things at the same time. I picked out from your last couple of shows really interested me. I marked red what I did different. So I attached, sending you the 3 images. Use them on your show Saturday if you like. Absolutely. Thank you for that. iPhone photo. You'll see these images 1, 2, and 3. This is just showing the scene, this plant that he photographed. 2, the wet plate sessions as usual. Take off the plate from the silver, take it out, expose it, develop it. It's underexposed. You'll see this. And then he gives his specs there below. And then 3, 15 minutes later, the silver about 3 minutes. Wash it in distilled water for 2 minutes. And then tap water, rinse for 2 minutes in tap water. Quick wash in distilled water, and put it back in the silver bath for another 3 minutes. So what he's doing is he's doing the Sutton's, washing those bromides away, resensitizing it, and running that experiment. Check this out. It's really cool. He says, my thoughts, what I've discovered, I find your collodion is great with a lot of detail, wide range of blacks and grays, sometimes very smooth, giving more silver to the bath. I would imagine more contrast to the images. The technique, yes, you do build up more silver that way, and depending on your pH. The technique of washing the plates in between is awesome. Look at the gain of speed. A really good example here, guys. I developed the plate until it was right to stop. The image appeared as usual. I stopped the image, kind of vanished in the dark. Yeah, that happens sometimes. And it came back when fixing. Means it was embedded quite well. Feel free. I appreciate you criticize the technique, chemistry of my plates. I'm sure you read a lot of things in it. With my developer, I'm not sure if it still has enough of the alcohol and vinegar. Image 3, you see it in the 3rd image. I added alcohol, but it still doesn't seem smooth enough to flow evenly. I now have an idea how you get your plate so clean. The veiling on the edges, I guess, because I didn't clean the holder between each plate. Well, look at that. Sometimes I like it when the plate doesn't come out perfect, but it fits the image. That's true. Sometimes it is a happy accident, serendipity. But most of the time I want clean plates, and I would like to know how to get that goal on purpose, not accidentally. I do maintenance as you suggest, clean everything and take care of it, but sometimes we call it, it's der worm. Yeah, it's the worm inside. Absolutely. It's the poltergeist inside, right? The worm. I don't mix my own clothing, but I mix developer, fixer, and developer. Excellent, Oliver. Thank you for sharing that. Look at this, guys. This is really great. So his original scene is plate 1, plate 2, and plate 3. So he washed his plate between plate 2 and 3. There is at least a stop, maybe 2 stops difference in that. That is just absolutely amazing. Dale Wilson ran the test for us a couple of weeks ago. Didn't have quite, because his images were a little overexposed anyway. This is a really good example of Sutton's plate washing and resensitizing and the gain in speed. So it's the same thing. You heard what I read there. Really, really good example there. I appreciate you sharing that with us, Oliver, because at the end of the day, people have asked me about that. So thank you for sharing that. Now, cleanliness wise, you're not so bad. You've got, yeah, exactly. You've got a little bit of oyster staining from the edges of the plate holder. Again, you can polyurethane those and then clean them off in between, a little damp distilled water, paper towel, clean those off. Make sure you clean your plates well. Don't try not to handle them too much on the edges, because people tend to squeeze them, and then the skin of their fingers get push over the edge of the plate. They'll create little indentations and then string out organic material. And it's really easy. It's difficult to get super clean plates unless you're really conscious and really secure in your methodology, because most people are just so nervous and working around, and that it takes a while. But these aren't bad. I mean, they're not bad. Little organic material for sure, but that's about it. Very good. Thank you for sharing that, Oliver. I appreciate that. I know everybody out there does as well too. Really great to see that increased in speed, 50 to 100%. He wasn't kidding there. I mean, the detail, I mean, just the pot alone and the leaf in front, you see the details in the rib. And I mean, it's just really good stuff. You know what? Let me blow this up, because I want to let you look at that thing full screen there if I can. Yeah, you can see, man, just looking at the leaf back here and the leaf over. I mean, it's just an amazing gain in speed. It's just really, really cool that way. So John says, can we talk about twirling technique? Yes, absolutely. That's good. Can we talk about twirling techniques? I use a suction cup with a bulb on the back and an old hand crank drill over a bucket. There you go. I read 1 rotation per second. Then I take it over a hot plate and slowly twirl it over the heat till dry. I'm not entirely happy with it. Yes, that's a great point. Let me show you something here, if I can find it. I think I can. I'm trying to get my library organized so I can find stuff when I need it. I'm not thoroughly all the way good. Thank you again. I just wanted to mention one thing. These drip edges on this plate number 2, that's from what we talk about, this fire, putting the plate in and then pulling it back up too soon. That's the ether, not quite evaporating off into the silver there. That's what creates that look and feel. We've talked about that quite a bit, but let's do this. Let me show you this. Let me go solo layout here. Let's go to John's question here about twirling. This is our friend Peter O'Donnell in Ireland, and this is his book on orotones, right? Let me show you what his solution is here. I hope he doesn't mind. I don't think he will. Backing, salt prints. So he's got a whole chapter here on plate spinners, or an entry on plate spinners. And so this is what he has in his book here. He actually also showed us the salad spinner. The salad spinner. That's what he uses. He says, my current plate spinner uses an old Meccano set with a small DC motor. But he does say in here that he even consistent coating albumin is necessary. And it will be too for these albumin negatives. If you want to try this, it's really important that you have a good coating on it. And you can also use a glass rod, right? A puddle pusher rod if you want to mix that around. The original plate spinners for photography were known as whirlers. You will struggle to find one that's intact and working today. I bet you will. You should choose the commercial spinner. Make it safely handle the size of the plate you want to work with, of course. Albumin spit from the spinning plate, the whirl. I know he talks about it here. One alternative that served me well for many years was a lid from a salad spinner. He talked about this when he came on and promoted this book. The lid from a salad spinner. It's a hand crank, relatively inexpensive. As simple as it was, it produced wonderfully even plates. Remove the lid from the spinner, and fix it to a board, making sure you can still crank it, securing your plates done by employing 4 small clips. Only a few seconds of spinning is required. Using a salad spinner was suitable for plates up to 5x7 in size. So that's his book. We've promoted it before here on the show, but that's what he uses. And again, I've coated enough albumin just doing the well, I guess we'd call it the for density and for making negatives. Just rather than Q-tipping the edges, we've gone with the full-on. I can't get our stuff back. We've gone with the full-on albuminizing plates, and I use a steamer, a humidifier as well too. That'll help spread the albumin too. So, but that's a good question. Yes, Peter's book is at peterodonnell.com. If you just go to his website, you'll find it right there. Go to his website, you'll find his book there. It's great. I'll do some orotones. It's kind of farther down on my list. I got a whole notebook full of stuff that I want. There you go. Thank you, Jeffrey. You put it right there. I got a whole notebook full of stuff to do. Let's see. Hey, Mark Zimmerman, good to see you. Happy World Cyanotype Day. Yes, okay, good deal. Good deal. It is Cyanotype Day today, I guess. I always miss these holidays. Steve, hi, everybody. Happy to have this live chat. Yeah, good. From Malaysia. Good to see you, Steve. Good. Any suggestion to dry albumin paper negative after sensitizing to make them flat? You know what? The best thing to do there is a heat press, very low. If you use, he's talking about albumin paper. If you're using crowbar, the stuff is thin, it wrinkles really bad. To get it nice and smooth, pre or post, I've done it both. I have a heat press that I put paper down in, and that's really hanging won't work. They curl up. That paper albumin gets crumply and that thin paper. Wet paper tape, you might try that. Dry albumin paper negative after sensitizing and making them flat. Yeah, it's tough. I like to use the heat heat press, but anyway it works. That's fine. Yeah, try it. Let us know if anybody have good suggestions. Come out and let us know, because it's always good to hear people's experience, real life stuff. So I know I mentioned this book to you before. Now that I have my library out, I'll keep showing you these, but I can't. This is really interesting. One of these, I tell my story about how I got involved in collodion. I got this book in 1999, and this is what I put in the margins in my book right here. This is one of the images that got me into collodion. Was seeing that photograph in the year 2000, over 21 years ago. I started my journey. But this book starts out with the daguerreotype, calotype, all that stuff. And this is John Zarkowski's looking at photographs from the MoMA. 100 pictures from the collection, the Museum of Modern Art. It's a great book. If you don't have this book, I love to collect photo books and read them, pull them down. Everything's great online too, but to have something physical makes a big difference for me. I highly recommend it. I know I've probably recommended it before here, but it's a book to have in your library if you're a photo freak like I am. I'm obsessed with photography. I know people say, "Oh, you're too far gone." I don't know. I love it. I recommend watching. If you have not seen This film, you should go rent it today and watch it. This has inspired one of my big inspiration on one of my projects, especially when I was in Germany. This is called Paragraph 175 by Jeffrey Friedman and Rob Epstein. Actor Rupert Everett, a great narration, narrates this disquieting documentary from filmmakers Epstein and Friedman that exposes the Third Reich's vicious persecution of male homosexuals during World War II. The film's title comes from an arcane 1871 German statute making sodomy punishable by incarceration with the ultimate goal of eradicating gays completely. Only a handful of survivors remain to recount their traumatic tales. Very moving story. For anyone out there that knows me, my photographic journey has been mostly portraiture of marginalized communities, talking about otherness, talking about groups and people pushed to the margins of our society. And this, while this was influenced me during my work, both in the States and when I lived abroad in Germany, this really, I was exposed to this in graduate school. And when I watched it, it really had a profound effect on me. I'm going to mute myself and we'll play this. Okay, here. It's only 3 or 4 minutes.
Look at this. That's me. That is my friend from New York. He was my first exotic lover.
I think in rural Berlin you were free, you could do what you want.
Wenn ich sonntags in mein Kino gehe und im Film die feinen Leute sehe, denk ich immer wieder,
Half a century ago, the Nazi regime set out to rid the German nation of homosexuality. An estimated 10 to 15,000 were sent to concentration camps. Today, fewer than 10 of these men are known to be alive.
Während ich da war, wurden alle Homosexuellen transportiert nach Mauthausen und sind fast alle. Umgekommen.
Yeah, that's I don't know if you noticed the triptychs. I did a series of those, and I didn't see this film until after I'd done those triptychs, which was really interesting. But if you're interested in that kind of history and you're interested in marginalized communities or have an interest in why death anxiety, why we treat people the way we do that are different from us, and the reasons why we do that, I always mention Ernest Becker and the denial of death, and Sheldon Solomon that was on this show a few months ago talking about why we treat people who are different than us, and sometimes in really terrible ways. And this film really enlightened me to the struggle, not only for Jewish folks, but a lot of others that were persecuted during that time. So, not that I want to end on a bummer note, but that's really that's all I have this week, which is a lot. I know it's a lot, but I hope you got something out of the Albumin on Glass. For some reason, my broadcast didn't, my show didn't air on the Wet Plate Collodion channel or the Chemical Pictures Book channel. They kept throwing me errors, and I see up here on my screen I have too, but it's on YouTube. I'll put it back out there. People can watch it. So if anyone out there, I'll try to beat you to it, but if anyone out there tries the albumin on glass negative process, even if you don't make a print or anything, you just make a negative, come back on, let me know, come back on the show and let's take a look at it. A lot of you guys have time and energy and motivation, and that would be great. And if not, you can wait for me. I will do it. That's one of the first things. It kind of superseded and went to the top of my list. And again, like I said, next week, we'll look at the silver sunbeam, Fowler's process on this, how that's about 10 years later. And the photographic news in 1861, just a few years after this was published, we'll look at some of the changes in the albumin on glass negatives and try to get some insight of how chemistry and methodology changed over the years, making that happen. So I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your time. I hope you're healthy and happy and find this week good spirits. It's beautiful up here. We got 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. We're in that beautiful time of year. Starting to knock my darkroom stuff out. Real quick, what I've decided to do is I've got my my GoPro, and what I'm going to do when my darkroom gets opened, I'm going to film down there. Then I'll edit and come back and show you, because it's not manageable if I take you down there live. We may do something at some point, but I'm going to do pieces of it and I'll show you. And we'll start with some of these techniques, resensitizing the plate, albumin on glass, some of the Estabrook stuff, a lot of the Sutton stuff. We'll actually look at that, because I am starting my project very soon on these landscapes, these rock formations and trees here. So I appreciate all your time. Stay healthy, happy, and we will see you next Saturday, I hope. You have a good week. Bye-bye. Ciao.